there, Eric. So for the Essay 3 early drafts, we are giving screencast feedback just to kind of walk each student through the work that they've done so far and to help you think about the specific assignment and where you are already meeting the goals of the assignment and where you might want to dig in and focus your revision efforts as you get ready to revise your essay for the final submission. So after looking at your draft, I think what's really exciting is you're showing a high level of comprehension of the concepts from Chapter 3. So John Stuart Mill, Socrates, I think you did an especially nice job with Socrates, and then some of those other supporting resources that you're pulling in as well. So I definitely think you're on the right track. My biggest suggestion as we move through this draft is going to be, I'd like to see your draft go another step further to take the examples that you're discussing and apply them specifically to Jake's situation so that he can see how the choices he's making align with the advice that you're giving him. So I'm going to give you a lot of different pieces of feedback, but that's kind of the main overall takeaway suggestion is how to align this more specifically with Jake's decisions. So let's just start by kind of looking through the essay. We have this intro here that runs from the beginning right down to this part right here. So in the beginning, I think you're doing a really nice job of acknowledging Jake's situation and kind of summarizing back for him what the situation is, which is great because I think what that shows your reader, in this case Jake, is that you've done a good job of paying attention to his situation, that you understand the dilemma he's facing, and so you do a really nice job of summarizing that. This is kind of where I would say the intro part ends, and then this is what I would say is the first body paragraph of your essay when you introduce John Stuart Mill. So I would suggest having a paragraph break between these two paragraphs so that this is your intro and this is going to be your first body paragraph because that's where you're really diving into the specifics of your essay. So looking back at your introduction here, I would suggest at the end of the summary that you do, offer a thesis claim, okay? And your thesis claim is really what the position is that you're going to take in your essay. And so Jake is asking you for advice, and so what is your advice? So you might say something like, it sounds to me like you're pushing him in the direction of nursing school based on the sources you're using. And so Jake, I think ought, sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time, to go to nursing school. And I'll use, I really can't type today. I'll use the to support why I think this is the best choice. I don't know. This is horribly worded, but I think you can see where I'm going with it. Just be clear to Jake that this is your advice. Jake, at the end of the day, I think you're going to have the best life if you go to the nursing school. In this letter, I'd like to bring in some other philosophers to talk with you about why this is going to be the best choice or why this is most likely to lead you to the good life or something that's really upfront. Because that's how the reader knows where your essay is going. The reader then doesn't have to linger and sort of wonder, all right, where are they taking me from paragraph to paragraph? They know concretely what your entire argument is going to be supporting throughout the rest of the essay. So you certainly don't have to word it like this, but I'm just giving you an example of how you might offer a thesis claim at the end of your intro paragraph, and that sets up the rest of your essay. So then we move into this first body paragraph here, and this is where you're dealing with John Stuart Mill, and you very rightly bring up low quality and high quality decisions. And I think decisions may be okay in that sentence. I would probably use the word pleasures because that's how he describes it. And I know it's tricky because sometimes we want to paraphrase in our own words, but I really think it's important to get some of the phrasing on this accurate. So while people often choose the low quality pleasures over the high quality pleasures, we would actually be happier in the long run to choose the high quality decisions. You are absolutely right, and that's very nicely paraphrased. And so I think you're completely on the right track there. So let me see what suggestions I had in here. Okay, so this is going to be a good place for you to describe what these are. So remember when Eric taught you all what high quality and low quality pleasures were, he used examples in his book like tic-tac-toe versus chess. He gave you various examples to help you start to learn the difference. Consider that Jake is in the exact same situation that you were in when you read chapter 3. Jake has no idea what a low quality pleasure or a high quality pleasure is. So you have to give him Mill's definition, not in Mill's language, but you have to tell him, what makes a low quality pleasure is that you don't have to work very hard for it. It's easy. It's accessible to anybody. You can, have a lot of it if you want, and, it's going to continue to be there. So you might give some examples like watching television is a low quality pleasure. It rewards our brain because it feels good to just kind of chill out, enjoy. Eating chocolate is a low quality pleasure. Drinking beer may be a low quality pleasure. Like, these are things that bring us a certain amount of joy, but they're limited, right? There's not kind of like a long-term joy that comes with those things necessarily, unless you're a brewer, unless you make ice cream or something like that, if you've tapped into it into some high quality way. So what's the difference? Help Jake see, what's the difference between a high quality pleasure. A high quality pleasure, is one of those things that it's a struggle. It's not as easy as eating chocolate to play the piano. You may have to work really hard. You might get frustrated. You might walk away from your piano lesson feeling annoyed and frustrated. But over the long term, something like learning to play the piano or learning to read books, even though it's a struggle at first, it's going to reward you deeply and greatly in the long run. So Jake needs to hear about that. He needs to know what low and high quality pleasures are. Because when you tell him that he's tapping into low quality pleasures, he needs to know what that means, and he needs to find the suggestion to move toward high quality pleasures to actually be meaningful. So I would suggest giving him a lesson there. This is just a citation note. So when you're citing, you want to use the author's last name and the page number in parentheses rather than brackets. So rather than an abbreviation for Engaging Ethics, page 12, you would want to use Salahub 12, and that's how you're going to cite that. Just some really nice phrasing here. You said that Mill would say that you working at the resort is a low quality pleasure and the nursing program would be a high quality pleasure. So nicely worded. Okay, so down here you say that I'm suggesting that going through the nursing program, working as a nurse, helping people's health would be a more fulfilling pleasure. I think you're absolutely right. It seems that you believe that. It seems that you realize that Mill believes that, but I'd like to see you take it further. How so? So why is it a more fulfilling pleasure? So take this further with specifics. So Jake, how is it that going to nursing school specifically is going to lead you to fecund pleasures? Fecundity is another aspect that Mill talks about. And fecundity can be looked at a couple different ways. One way is that it's repeatable. And the other way is that fecund pleasures are those that open your doors to new pleasures, okay? So, for example, learning to read was really hard when I was in first and second grade. But learning to read allowed me to enjoy all kinds of great novels that, it opened the door to other pleasures for me. Learning to read allowed me to go to college. It allowed me to get a great job that I love. So it opened the door to all these other things that led me to have a really fulfilled life. So if you can imagine Jake being in nursing school, what are the doors that are being opened for him while he's there? If you can imagine Jake going into a hospital and working, what are the doors that are being opened for him there? How is nursing school possibly going to open more doors than just repeating the same thing at the resort every single day? Okay, so giving him some examples of that, I think, are going to make your argument much more convincing. So down here you have this really long quote from Mill, and I actually think, because I'm asking you to include some more information up here, that you could cut this quote out. It's not a requirement that you include any primary sources in this. And I think if you were to cut this specific quote out, along with that sentence, the point that you're making here still holds up just fine. The quote is going to be difficult for Jake to read anyway because it's written in Mill's language, so he would have to slow down and read the quote a few times in order to make sense of it. So I'm going to suggest just getting rid of that quote and just keeping that point the way you have it right here. Okay, then you move into Maslow, which is great. My biggest suggestion here is that right now what you have with Maslow is completely a summary. So you've summarized Maslow, but there's no indication of how any of these ideas from Maslow apply to Jake's life. So for example, you're going to want to help Jake see how Maslow's hierarchy specifically applies to his life. So it's probably clear that either job is going to help Jake meet those low-level needs. He's going to be able to earn enough money to have food and shelter if he's working at the resort or if he's working at a nurse. So he's going to get those lowest level needs met by working either job. But what is it going to take for Jake to feel a real sense of belonging and a part of a meaningful community? What's it going to take for him to actualize his self-esteem and to really feel proud and to feel accomplished of things? Are those things likely to be nurtured at the resort where he's not really challenged to grow? Or is he more likely to feel that sense of belonging and community? You know, I'm just thinking that, like, what is the kind of camaraderie like among nurses? I don't know if you ever go to one of the campuses, but at Westminster and Larimer, we have nurses, students who are training for nursing hanging around the hallway, and they are like a really strong team. They're always talking together. They're always studying together. There's a real sense of community and camaraderie there. And so how can Jake move into that, up that hierarchy with a sense of belonging in a strong community? How is he going to nurture his self-esteem? Let's imagine that he has a great day on the job as a nurse and he helps save somebody's life. I mean, imagine what that does for your self-esteem. And so how's he going to really fulfill those things that come higher on Maslow's hierarchy, okay? How's he going to actualize his full potential? So give him those examples so that he can see how this idea that Maslow has actually applies to the situation he's dealing with. Socrates, same thing. Really great ideas in here with Socrates and the hedonic treadmill, but how do they apply to Jake specifically? So if you're going to talk about appetites, well, what are Jake's appetites and how are they currently being fueled at his job at the resort? And how are things like willpower and reason going to help Jake balance his own psyche if he enters the nursing program? And so really kind of imagine how these things would apply to his specific life and talk about that. Here's a suggestion just to consider a transition. The body paragraphs are getting a little bit choppy, and so how might you create some kind of transition to move Jake from paragraph to paragraph? So something like, Jake, not only would Mill and Maslow advise you to go to nursing school, but Socrates will as well, and here's what he has to say. So something like that so that it's just not so much of a jump when we move from example to example. Okay. Same with the hedonic treadmill. So this is all great with the hedonic treadmill, but what is the hedonic treadmill in Jake's life? What does it look like? How is he going to get off the hedonic treadmill and do something more meaningful? So again, pulling in those specific examples. I thought the Buddhism stuff was really great that you included at the end. It just kind of ends things on with a nice touch. And I think that, I think your conclusion is strong as well. So those would be my big suggestions. I would suggest maybe jotting some of this stuff down or just pausing the video and going back, maybe reading this stuff in the margins a little more closely. And then, Eric, if you have any suggestions while you're revising this week, reach out to me, reach out to Eric's L Hub, and we'll be happy to help you along.